Good morning and welcome to Vince on a Friday. Man, it is so good to see you here with me today. If you're watching live, rumble.com/Vince. We got the live chat rolling, feeling good on a Friday. The Major cam is locked in. Major's locked in. Yes, Major, of course, lying at my feet as usual. We're having a great day. So there's Major. Here's me. And we're ready to go. We got a big show going, fellas. One, we've got to check in on the Autopen scandal because Congress has been digging in and suddenly Biden officials are clamming up. They don't want to talk anymore. And so now we're going to have to do this the hard way. Subpoena is going out the door saying you will appear under criminal penalty if you don't. That's a good piece of progress here. So I've got the updates on all of that coming up for you. We'll take a closer look at some of the ways that U.S. senators are now getting involved in that. Also, I've got border security updates for you as the region along the border that's now considered a military zone is expanding, and so much more. All ahead on this episode of Vince. I've also got Emily Jashinsky ahead. Can't wait to talk to her. She's great. She's got a lot of smart things to say. You'll get to hear her say them coming up on this edition of this show. Thanks for being here, as always. Best damn audience in media. And the way we keep this show going is through our great sponsors. And that includes Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is a great sponsor of this program. You know, if there's something that all of us can believe in, it's hard work, self-reliance, and showing up for the people who actually count on us. But a while back, I hit a wall. I was getting terrible sleep, and then I would drag myself through the next day on fumes. And so when that happens, you have to figure out a way to break out of that cycle. That's when I found Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values: hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It is a nighttime blend packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on each new day. Dream is made up of a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. And here's the deal for you. Beam will give you the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/Vince Show. Use the code Vince Show at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Vince Show. Use that code Vince Show for up to 40% off. Point. All right, baby. Great to see y'all here. Look, we got a big show today. You know, today is 1 year. Can you believe this? 1 year since the Democrats shoved Joe Biden directly into traffic. After all of that time taking advantage of him, just rolling him around in a wheelchair, and as he was drooling and his head was leaning over, saying, "Oh yeah, no, he's totally in charge. Yeah, he's the president of the United States." Of course, he wasn't doing anything like that. And then, as soon as they thought, "Oh man, the jig is up," people are beginning to notice. They took his wheelchair and they just shoved him right into the middle of a highway. That's what this was a year ago today. Take a look at this clip.
Strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
And the hits just kept on coming. What a disastrous debate. And I'm going to tell you, again, that was by design. A debate had never taken place on June 27th. A general election presidential debate? No, baby, those take place later in the year. But the Democrats had created this unique situation specifically so that they could shove Biden out of the race. That's why they did it so early. The game plan was simple. If he's going to fail disastrously, let's have it done early so that the American people get a solid case for why we need to get rid of him. So they put him on stage. He was completely asleep at the switch, incapable of doing the job. And then, of course, he collapses. He self-immolates on that stage. And they say, "Oh, my goodness, I had no idea that was going to happen." Why do you think every single cable network in unison all were saying that Joe Biden needs to get out of the race at the conclusion of the debate? Because they were all in on it. It was both a conspiracy of instinct and a lot of text messages flowing from establishment Democrats during the debate saying, "This guy's got to go. This guy's got to go." And all of a sudden, the news anchors start mouthing the words, "This guy's got to go." And sure enough, he was out. And so a party which calls itself Democratic was anything but, as they ignored their own primary voters and said, to hell with you. We don't care if you supported Biden in this process. They imposed Kamala Harris on that party. And of course, she couldn't win either. She couldn't pull it out either. And thankfully, we ended up with President Trump and your votes making it too big to rig. The rest, of course, is history. But amazing to think that that was a year ago today. That's how quickly time has flown. Now, in the intervening time, we have a lot of questions about that presidency. Not only was he despondent on that stage, he was despondent throughout the entire term. President 46 wasn't with it. So who was running the show? And this week, the House Oversight Committee has begun in earnest a bunch of these conversations with Biden officials to begin having this conversation about, hey, who was running these things? On Tuesday of this week, they brought in one of the White House officials by the name of Neera Tanden. She's an establishment Democrat. She's been around a very long time, and as about as establishment as you come. And just as she was arriving to Capitol Hill, the Trump administration pulled off a masterstroke, a total masterstroke, by removing her ability to claim executive privilege. They said, nope, no executive privilege protections for you. You've got to answer the questions under oath before Congress. So she went in and she got rug pulled immediately by the Trump White House. It was a good move because during that testimony, she revealed, yes, she was operating the Autopen, and no, Joe Biden wasn't involved. In fact, she claimed that Biden was involved perhaps at distance, but she was never involved in any of the conversations where top Biden officials would turn to her and say, use the Autopen, use the Autopen, use the Autopen. And so now we get a really key piece of this saga, which is who was wielding it. Neera Tanden was definitely one of them. And who was telling her to use the Autopen? It wasn't Joe Biden. So who was it? So that brings us to this week. Yesterday, Thursday, we were supposed to get more testimony on this subject from a person who is known as Jill Biden's work husband. His name is Anthony Bernal. Anthony Bernal, the work husband, which it sounds crazy, and it is crazy. This man has routinely been identified as one of the key power brokers in the Biden White House. In other words, wielding the power of the presidency without being elected to do it at all. Obviously, Joe Biden wasn't doing it. So who was? Well, you and I, many of us had assumed that Jill, of course, played a massive role in this, and she did. But the man that she relied on to run the show is a guy called Anthony Bernal. And this is not the first time this guy's name has come up. I want you to listen to this. This is Cut 5. Alex Thompson, he's the guy who co-wrote the book with Jake Tapper about how Biden's brain was broken. And Alex Thompson said on MSNBC recently, yeah, it was just a couple of people who were running that White House. Take a look. Here's Alex.
Who is the who in this conspiracy? Is it the inner circle?
Yeah, the people that were in charge were Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, Anthony Bernal, the First Lady's chief of staff, the First Lady, and Annie Tomasini. Those are the people that saw him the most and that had the most control over what he was doing and his day-to-day.
Yeah, so a really tight summary of the people who were involved in running the show at the White House. Now, Anthony Bernal is the one. He's the guy. And so yesterday he was supposed to appear for this Thursday hearing, but he did not. And the reason he didn't is because the Trump White House had yanked executive privilege. He saw what happened to Neera Tanden on Tuesday, and he said, I don't want a piece of that. So yesterday's hearing was supposed to be voluntary. Now, I'm annoyed that it started voluntary. Just fire subpoenas off to these guys right away. In the intervening time since all of this has happened, James Comer, the head of the Oversight Committee, has sent a subpoena to Anthony Bernal, and now he is being compelled to testify under force of law on July 16th. Again, I don't know why it takes so long. Just get him in now. He was already ready to go yesterday, presumably. Get him in now, but here we are. Mid-July, we're going to expect to hear from Anthony Bernal on this subject. But he was scared of the fact that he didn't have executive privilege. And let's be honest, the reason you'd be scared about that is because you've got something to hide. You've got something to hide. This Bernal has additionally been mentioned by other figures in and around the Biden White House. Among them is a fella who worked as a White House aide in I believe, the digital office. His name is Deterian Jones. He was seated alongside the former DNC Vice Chair David Hogg. You remember him? The boy wonder on the left? That guy got thrown out of the DNC recently for being a white dude. That was their pretext. In reality, they threw him out because he was trying to orchestrate a primary process that resulted in different people coming into the Democrat Party. They didn't like that. The DNC is really into rigging elections, not into having them. And so they threw David Hogg out. But David Hogg and Deterian Jones were caught on a hidden camera by Project Veritas in late May. This video comes out. And I want you to see this. Here's cut 4. These guys talking about the role that Anthony Bernal in particular played with running the Biden White House. Look at this.
Foundational question for me is like, how corrupt is the DNC if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden? Well, the president of the United States.
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be like a campaign arm of the president, ultimately. The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress to you enough.
Like Joe Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at the left. Like, I would avoid him. Like, he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony Bernal.
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's like a shadowy, like, Wizard of Oz type figure. That's what made him so, like, I knew how he looked, but I'm like, the general public wouldn't know how this man looked. But he wielded an enormous amount of power, and I can't stress to you how much power he had in the White House.
An enormous amount of power. I can't stress to you how much power he had at the White House. That's the White House chief of staff to Jill Biden. Now, what was Jill elected to again? What job was she elected to? Oh, nothing. Jill was elected to nothing. No. But boy, she wanted to desperately hang on to that White House, didn't she? Didn't she? You heard all these reports about what's happening. Hunter Biden, did you see that Hunter Biden owes a bunch of back payments now for all of his legal defenses? Yeah, he owes a lot of money right now to these lawyers who were involved in his defense. What happened? I thought all these Democrat donors were financing his entire operation. What happened to his sugar brother, Kevin Morris? Remember that? It all dried up. Nobody's buying his paintings anymore. How did that happen? Boy, does this not sound familiar to you? This is exactly what happened to the Clinton Foundation after Hillary Clinton lost. As soon as it became clear that she wasn't going to have the levers of power, bam, the money dried up. The money dried up. It was gone because people were buying influence. It's obvious as to anyone who's paying even a little bit of attention to this. Nobody was buying Hunter Biden's macaroni art. You know, it's ridiculous. The Biden family wasn't hanging that stuff up on the fridge. The reason he was making it was to use it as a vehicle to bring money into the Biden family's corrupt causes. And it disappeared. It is gone. They don't have that cash. It's gone. And so we're looking back at all of this and going, okay, let's unwind this constitutional crisis here. Let's get to the bottom of all of it and hold these people accountable who would dare violate our Constitution in this way. So Anthony Bernal had an enormous amount of power, say actual White House officials and the former DNC vice chairman. Am I supposed to dismiss that out of hand because he's David Hogg and he's ridiculous? Yeah, he's ridiculous, but he was the vice chairman of the DNC for a time. And here he is caught on hidden camera going, yeah, it was Anthony Bernal. Yeah, tight circle around Biden. Tight circle that were running the whole operation. Yeah. That's what's happening. So we got a subpoena out to that guy. He's set to appear on July 16th. He's not alone. There's another subpoena that went out. Dr. Kevin O'Connor, who I will remind you, he's the White House doctor. He's also a Biden business partner. This guy was going into business with the Biden family. He's been with Biden forever, going back to the, certainly in the first White House too. And that's when, remember, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, now Congressman Ronnie Jackson, he was the head White House doctor at the time. He didn't like this Kevin O'Connor character. He just got bad feelings from him, and he couldn't remove him. He said Obama protected this guy because he said Biden would lose his mind if they fired Kevin O'Connor as badly as Ronnie Jackson wanted to. Kevin O'Connor, he never appeared before the press. Remember all of this? He never appeared before the press. When Trump was in office and they were doing health scans of him, they kept putting the White House doctor. They put Ronnie Jackson out in front of the press. They talked to these guys like crazy. They were like, are you sure that Trump isn't mentally ill? Are you sure that he's not broken? Are you sure that he's not about to die? These are the types of questions the press was asking. And meanwhile, they released these paper statements that Biden was in perfect health. He's doing great. He's doing great. He's got a little bit of a stiff gait, but other than that, he's fine. That's the kind of crap that would come out from Dr. Kevin O'Connor, and he would never appear before the press. Never. And the press didn't spend any time demanding it either. Did you notice they didn't spend months on end saying, where's the doctor? Where's the doctor? Are you going to bring out the doctor? They didn't. They didn't. And so now the question is, where's the doctor? Well, he's got a subpoena. He's going to appear July 9th. We're a lot closer to that one. And James Comer is going to get some answers from him. Meanwhile, Senator Eric Schmidt is working away here at this. He's taking a different approach. So while the House is calling in Biden officials, getting their testimony, and now demanding it in the form of these subpoenas, Senator Eric Schmidt is actually approaching the head of the National Archives. Now, quick quiz for the chat. Who's the head of the National Archives? Who's the head of the National Archives, chat? I'm going to give you a hint. He's got other jobs. Let's see. One of them, I should start small. He's the National Security Advisor. Yeah, old school ways, flying in with Rubio right away. That's right. Marco Rubio is the head of the archives. So I like the chances of getting some answers here. Little Marco, there you go. Old school ways with a throwback on that. Little Marco is the head of the archives, as well as the National Security Advisor, as well as the Secretary of State. He's doing it all. Eric Schmidt has approached him here and said, hey, we need all these documents associated with who was operating the Autopen. You've got control of them. Normally, getting access to presidential materials could be a little bit more difficult, but Eric Schmidt has filed what he's referring to as a special access request to Marco Rubio to get these files. Take a look. Here's Senator Eric Schmidt this week, cut 6, explaining that he's getting closer to getting the answers that we demand. Here we go.
I can't tell you how many times people in Missouri have asked me, who is running the country? Who is actually in charge? Like, it's kind of an important thing in our constitutional republic, like who's making the decisions as president of the United States. Look at what happened in the last week in this country. You have to have a president like President Trump who's in full command of the office, makes clear decisions. That did not happen for almost probably the full 4 years of Joe Biden's reign, right? So who was? The truth is, you probably had a series of, women's study majors from Ivy League institutions who used to write white papers about open borders are now suddenly in charge of opening the border. So This is a bigger scandal than Watergate. We need to continue to drill down on it. We're going to be subpoenaing or getting documents from the archivist to see if there were actually authorizations for the Autopen. Has big consequences. I know James Comer's working hard too.
Yeah, baby. That's exactly right. Anthony Bernal. I haven't checked closely, but I could believe it. He was a women's studies major. Let's go with that. Women's studies major, opening our borders up, importing foreign nationals. Yeah, let's get to the bottom of that. So Eric Schmidt has sent a special access request to the archivist, Marco Rubio, and said, hey, can we get all these files? We have to know the chain of custody on the Autopen. And I saw somebody in the chat point out that Little Marco is the old nickname. We shouldn't use it anymore. I agree with you. I think Little Marco is retired. We should hang that jersey up in the rafters, the Little Marco jersey. We've retired that jersey. You know what he is now? Mighty Marco. Mighty Marco. At least for now, unless there's some reason for that status to change. I like Mighty Marco. I think that's great. I hope the president picks that up. So Mighty Marco could produce the answers we need here. As Eric Schmidt says, this Biden mental decline cover-up, this is Eric Schmidt this week. He said was one of the most damning scandals in American history. And a key priority of mine, says Eric Schmidt, is to make sure that something like this never happens again. The only way to do that is to figure out what went wrong and who was running the country. With these documents, the subcommittee can actually begin crafting a solution. So Eric Schmidt. So I'm good. I'm glad to see these guys going. Mighty Marco, baby. Mighty Marco is doing the work. And he'll be, we'll have to upgrade the name because at some point, if he delivers for us on all this stuff, we'll just keep making the name even better. Mighty MAGA Marco. I don't know. He can upgrade. He can keep working on that. That'd be a big deal. Okay, I've got a lot more coming up. I've got to talk about the state of our border right now, how the United States military has done a great job on this, actually. They've expanded hundreds of miles of border zone that is now controlled by the United States military. That has really big implications. In fact, we had a big conversation yesterday with Ron Vitiello about that very thing. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, all of the implications for that. And also, we'll be joined by Emily Jashinsky here coming up in just a couple of minutes. She's got a great new show. I want you to know about it. I'm going to participate in it too, so you'll be able to catch me there. That's all ahead on this episode of Vince. Great to have you with us as always. You know, I'm not very big on trends, but I do like clothing that feels good and lasts. That's critical to me. And that's actually why I keep going back to Quince. Quince. Vince loves Quince. They've got lightweight layers and high quality staples that really have become great everyday essentials for me. Quince has all the things you actually want to wear this summer. They've got organic cotton silk polos, European linen beach shorts, comfortable pants that work for everything from backyard hangouts to nice dinners. And the best part, everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and then cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury pieces without the markups. And Quince only works with factories that actually use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I love all the Quince stuff I have hanging in my closet. I'm constantly going for it. It's perfect for me. You're going to love it too. Stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/Vince. That's easy. How could you forget that? Quince.com/Vince for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Vince to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Vince. Yes, indeed. Mighty Marco. Mighty Marco. Vince, you should put on pants or fix the major cam. Well, I have good news for you. The major cam is working and I have pants on. See, I've got the pants on. I've got the dog present. What else do I need? My entire day is set if I've got those things. Yeah, there he is. That's the pup. He's doing great today. And I'm glad he's here. All right. Mighty Morphin Power Marco. That's pretty funny. I like that too. And thank you for having pants on. You're welcome. It is my privilege, my pleasure to do that. Okay. Let's talk about what's going on our border right now, because I've got something fun to share with you. The Pentagon has established a 250-mile military buffer zone along America's southern border. This is fun news. I love this. The great Jason Hopkins over at the Daily Caller News Foundation reporting, the Department of Defense has established a massive military buffer zone in southern Texas. This is in accordance with a presidential directive. Pete Hegseth directed this creation of this new buffer zone. It's called the National Defense Area, and it covers 250 miles along the Rio Grande. And that buffer zone is considered an extension, this is really important, an extension of Joint Base San Antonio, according to the Air Force. And that land was previously just considered, it was administered rather by the International Boundary and Water Commission, but now the military has taken it over under the direction of Northcom, Northern Command. What this means in practice is not merely that we have members of the military there supporting the border. What it means is that if you cross into it illegally, you are now officially, no matter whether or not this is your first time entering or re-entering, committing a felony. A felony. Now, this is a big deal for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that if you end up in a sanctuary city and you're taken into custody, they can force you. That is, the federal government can force these sanctuary cities to turn these guys over because they can get warrants for them now. If you're guilty of a felony, they can easily secure a warrant and they can place you under arrest. And these sanctuary cities can't do anything about it. They have to comply with the federal law. So this is a brilliant move meant to both catch illegals and to stop the sanctuary cities from circumventing federal law. It is chef's kiss perfect, and it means more protection on our southern border. Listen to Ron Vitiello. He was with us yesterday. Here's cut one, talking about how these illegals will be popped for felonies and be taken into custody.
So it's very difficult for someone to cross the border now, and also the consequences are much higher than they used to be. You're most likely to be prosecuted. The acceptance rate from the U.S. Attorney's Office across the borders is about 95%. And so people get arrested, they get prosecuted in federal court, and there are 2, soon to be 4, military designated areas along the southwest border, near Santa Teresa, New Mexico, near El Paso, Texas, and soon to come online, the Barium Goldwater Range in Yuma, Arizona. So if someone is unlucky enough to not notice the signs that those are being marked out as military areas, they will cross the border illegally, be charged with that, and they will also be charged with crossing into a military designated area without permission of the commander. That's a felony offense first time. And so if you cross the border now, you're likely to be apprehended. You will most likely be prosecuted. And in either case, you will be removed back to your home country quite quickly.
Yeah. So the U.S. attorney in California has already begun to take advantage of all of this. Anyone who has come into the country twice, so you come in illegally the first time, yes, it's a criminal violation, but it's that felony re-entry that's a really big deal. Anybody who's come in multiple times, they're guilty of what's called felony re-entry. And so in California, the U.S. attorney there has been using that in order to secure warrants for arrests for all these people inside of a sanctuary state, inside of those sanctuary cities. And it has been a absolutely brilliant move to get these illegals out of the country and let ICE take these guys into custody. Look at this, ICE, baby. That's what we're doing. Tom Homan actually able to get control of these guys and get them out of our country. This military zone maneuver makes it so that, yeah, you're guilty of a felony the second you step in. So that's a really big deal. That is a very big deal. Love to see these guys being creative in the face of all of this corruption. Additionally, we've got an update for you on what's going on with old Kilmar. Remember, this is Chris Van Hollen's conjugal visit lover, who was for a time in El Salvador on a tropical vacation inside of a high-security prison down there. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is right now back in the United States. He's in Tennessee. And there's a lot of stuff going around right now about what's happening to Kilmar and what's going to happen next. Let me just give you a quick update on this guy. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going to be deported at some point from the United States. The reason he's back is because the United States, the Trump administration, sought his extradition back to the United States so that he could be prosecuted for human trafficking. This is not going how Chris Van Hollen had hoped. He was hoping that his lover would just come back and be free to run around in Maryland again and be a gangster. No, that's not happening. Kilmar Abrego Garcia will be deported. But here's the update, not to his native El Salvador, according to prosecutors. Remember, earlier this week, the Supreme Court okayed the Trump administration's ability to deport people to third countries, not just to the country of origin. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. It's like closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. You can't stay here. Suspected MS-13 gang member Kilmar Abrego Garcia is going to be deported after he's released from jail in Tennessee, but not to his native El Salvador, according to the prosecutors. The Trump administration plans to initiate those removal proceedings against Kilmar and send him to a third country. That's according to a Justice Department lawyer, Jonathan Goyne. Now, here's another piece of this that matters. The Trump administration wants to prosecute this guy all the way. A DOJ spokesman has indicated the department intends to try Abrego Garcia before he's deported. DOJ spokesman Chad Gilmartin said in a statement, quote, "This defendant has been charged with horrific crimes, including trafficking children, and will not walk free in our country again." White House Deputy Press Secretary Abigail Jackson added that Abrego Garcia was returned to the United States to face trial for these egregious charges against him. He's going to face the full force of the American justice system, including serving time in American prison for the crimes he's committed. And then guess what happens at the conclusion of his prison sentence, assuming it's short enough for him to live past it? He'll be deported. He'll be deported from the United States of America. That's the Trump administration's plan here. So this is I think this is the opposite of what the left wanted. The left wanted this guy to go free. So this is another case of who's going to take him into custody? Who's going to take Kilmar into custody?
How you doing?
ICE, baby. They're going to take him into custody. All right, goodbye, Kilmar. They should let Chris Van Hollen do a ride along or something for the deportation. You know, he'd love that. He'd love that. Keep him at bay though. He gets a little handsy, but you know, he could watch if he wants. All right. So we've got that. And speaking of crazy Democrats and immigration, We also have more attacks on ICE, baby. Coming to us today from greasy Governor Gavin Newsom of California. Here's cut 2. Gavin Newsom this week joining the chorus of Democrats attacking ICE agents for just doing their job. Take it away, greaseball.
Brought up the masks again. There's a California bill that proposes to unmask ICE agents. Do you believe that's a meaningful step towards accountability?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not even making this up. Literally, that was a bill that was just introduced. There's over 2,000 bills. They just introduced that in reaction to everything going on. And it's actually going through legal counsel right now. The question is, can you legally require that they become unmasked? But regardless of the merits and the demerits of that, I mean, why are they masked? What are you afraid of? If they're doing your job, doing a lot, it's to increase stress. It's to increase anxiety. You said it. Masked men, disproportionately men, in unmarked cars without identifying themselves, or at least difficult to even identify, from all of these multi-letter agencies that even if you're in the business of government, you don't even understand what half of these agencies do and who they are. And you're being quite literally thrown in the back of a car, whether you're a citizen or not, and they'll figure it out later. That's not America.
Guy talks too much with his hands. I talk a lot with my hands. It's actually, it's not the hands talking that I don't like. It's the bizarre hand talking. It's like he's trying to knead imaginary bread as he's talking. He's like, everything about him is super weird and greasy and disgusting. But anyway, there's Gavin Newsom. And he's attacking these ICE agents again and saying, why are you wearing masks? It's so hard to identify them when we see them. Why are they wearing masks? It's not hard. You know what it says right there on their outfit? ICE. It says ICE right on the outfit. It says ICE. What does it say? It says HSI. It says FBI. It is as obvious as anything when you see these guys. And it's true. Some of these guys are plainclothes as they're making these arrests. But the reason that they're wearing the masks is to conceal their identities because people that vote for Gavin Newsom attack them. Lefties have been attacking ICE agents. There's a 500% increase in assaults on ICE agents. So what do you recommend we do here, Governor, to stop that? Yeah, he's got no recommendations for that because he doesn't care about that outcome. It's Gavin Newsom. He's gross. He's gross. And he talks with his hands like a weirdo. Again, I talk with my hands, but not like a weirdo. I was raised correctly. Okay. Coming up, we've got Emily Jashinsky joining us. We'll talk to her about everything we got going on in the world in her great new show. And I can't wait to get to that. I got to thank our sponsors. We've got Bone Charge that supports the program. And I support Bone Charge. I love Bone Charge. I've been using the Bone Charge infrared sauna blanket ever since they sent it to me. And boy, this thing is awesome. I have a sauna in my house. It's a blanket. You just wrap yourself up in it, and it works great. It's a game changer. It's very easy to use. You can relax, rejuvenate. You feel great after you use this thing. And my wife loves the red light face mask from Bone Charge. Every night, she puts this thing on, and she's seeing great results with it. If you want to improve your skin's texture, you want to reduce inflammation, you can get some fantastic results out of that red light face mask. It's like having a mini spa treatment right at home. If you're thinking about trying these out, you're in luck. Head to bonecharge.com, use the code VINCE at checkout, and get 15% off. Both of these products have made a huge impact for us. I'm sure you're going to love them too. Use the code VINCE at bonecharge.com to save 15%. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. Our thanks to Bone Charge for being a great sponsor of the Vince Show. And Blackout Coffee. Every day. Blackout Coffee. Start my day. And I get fired up with Blackout Coffee. I love Blackout Coffee. They're a great sponsor of this show. Blackout Coffee is owned by a fella called John. He's a great American, and he's the real deal. He built Blackout Coffee from the ground up, refusing to compromise on quality or values. It's America First coffee, roasted fresh right here in the United States. There's no woke nonsense, just bold, strong coffee for people who actually get stuff done. And as you know, Blackout Coffee has been the official coffee of everybody here at Silverlock. Look, this is a brand that stands for the right values, and they make a delicious cup of coffee. That's the most important thing to me. When I'm buying coffee, I want great coffee. That's what Blackout is. Blackout's great. Here's the deal. John is hooking you up with a great cup of coffee. You can head over to blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Use the code Vince. That's VINCE for 20% off your first order. Whether you like whole bean, ground, or even instant coffee that doesn't suck, Blackout Coffee has you covered. Support a company that actually shares your values. Blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Use the code Vince, and you're going to get 20% off your first order, baby. Blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Our thanks again to Blackout Coffee for being awesome. And our thanks to Major for lying here next to me throughout this program. Hello, Major. He's having a great. You doing all right, buddy? He's doing all right. He's doing all right. He's assumed the position. Okay, let's bring in our great guest now. Emily Jashinsky joins us on the program. Emily is a wonderful human being. I've known her for many years. We played on the same softball team a long time ago, and the Daily Caller was actually they're still playing softball these days, but without the benefit of Emily and myself. Emily Jashinsky's here. She's the host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky. It is just out on Megyn Kelly's great podcast network, and she joins us now. Hello, Emily. Good to see you.
Hey, Vince, my recollection is that you were sort of the designated shuttle driver to the bar after the softball game. So, I mean, thank you.
I did do a lot of that. That's true. That's true. Yes, every good softball game ends with going to the bar, which is totally awesome. Speaking of the bar, I've been checking your show out this past week, and you're on Mondays and Wednesdays, right? 10 p.m. at night.
That's right.
And when you do the show, I've noticed that you've cracked a beer. Do you crack a beer every episode? Is that a feature on the show?
I mean, it's not a feature, but it's just sort of my nightly routine anyway. So it's like if I'm gonna have to work at 10 p.m., I'm probably going to have a beer with me.
And did you make a conscious decision to do Miller Lite instead of Bud Light, or was that just always your option?
So I always make a conscious decision to side with Miller over Bud because I'm from the Milwaukee area. So it's got to be Miller. Now, I don't mind Bud Light, and I have a horrible opinion, Vince, that you and your listeners will be offended by, likely. I like Bud Light Lime. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, actually.
It's possible that you just like lime and water. That could be the actual explanation for that opinion. But okay, that's fine. You're allowed to like stuff. Hey, let's talk about what's actually going on in the world these days. President Trump, fresh back from NATO. Are you at all surprised by the global reception now? Don't you kind of get the feeling that everyone's sort of surrendered to the Trump phenomenon that didn't exist a couple years ago?
Am I surprised that the Secretary General of NATO is referring to Donald Trump as daddy? Yes, Vince, I am actually.
You really? You're surprised?
By that. Mark Rutte calling him daddy. Trump obviously loved that. He's put out like multiple videos touting it at this point. And you can't really blame him because he was enemy number one of NATO. And one of the things I thought was interesting that we saw from Mark Rutte, actually, we've seen it also a bit from Claudia Sheinbaum down in Mexico and a couple other world leaders who have realized it's actually a pretty obvious and simple way to negotiate with Donald Trump. And it is to like say nice things about America and say nice things about Donald Trump instead of saying awful things about America and Donald Trump and positioning yourself as an enemy of the United States and Donald Trump. Actually, maybe don't be a jerk and he'll come to the table with you. And that's what you saw with NATO this week. And it's better for NATO. It's better for Europe that they're increasing their security commitments per Donald Trump. And I also think, Vince, maybe that's one of the things that's made them come around on Donald Trump is they've sort of realized that he was right.
Yes, for sure. And in the last NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, was also grateful to the president, although he never called him daddy. That's an upgrade from the last time. I do think that there's a lesson in here that I hope that Democrats domestically don't pick up, Emily Jashinsky, which is to treat the president with good faith and try and have negotiations with him. I have this opinion. I think it's unorthodox, but whatever, I've got it. I've always thought that like the delusion that the left has manifested and the way that they treat Trump all the time keeps the president from negotiating with them at all. Like whatever their priorities are, they're never going to achieve them because they never approach the president in good faith. Kim Kardashian tried, remember, and all of a sudden she got a big criminal justice reform bill negotiated with the president of the United States. But Democrats never really learned that lesson. They instead hate him so much, they refuse to treat him as a human being. And in some sense, I think that kind of pays off for the rest of us.
It's such an interesting point because Nancy Pelosi actually briefly flirted with this tack in Trump 1.0 and almost got him to come to the table on DACA, of all things, on DACA. But then the pressure from the hashtag resistance base was so strong that Nancy Pelosi couldn't possibly sustain her efforts to negotiate with Donald Trump without also constantly trashing Donald Trump. And so it didn't work out. And on that note, Vince, I think you can remain hopeful because there's no way that Democrats have an incentive structure that will allow them to actually like get wins in negotiations with Donald Trump, because they can't possibly come to the table without constantly slandering him, smearing him to their supporters.
And kind of how things are going. And one thing that I've noticed is, by and large, the party isn't really changing tact. They've stuck with, we need to impeach Trump, and Trump, an orange man bad. But there are some exceptions, and that New York mayoral race this week, I think is, and I've been following some of your coverage of this, and so I'm interested in your thoughts on the subject. So remind me, I keep calling this guy Zordon, just obviously to make a mockery of him. I think it's Zoran. Is that his name? Zoran Mamdani?
Zoran. Yeah, but it's unclear whether it's pronounced Zoran or Zoran.
Okay. So he's a communist. He calls himself a democratic socialist. But he ran a campaign over the last few months where he said stuff like, we've got to get rid of regulations that stop small businesses from starting up. Mm-hmm. Which I hear something like that, I'm like, wait a second. This is completely discordant, because you're the commie and you're saying that we need to get the government out of the way of small businesses. Tell me what's going on here, what this phenomenon is, and whether or not there's a path. Like, in other words, is there a strategy within it for Democrats to sort of figure out how to get some success?
Yes, there is. We'll see how it's able to work for Zoran Mamdani in a general election, because he has tweeted things like, for example, queer liberation is defunding the police. But then he, in the debate, for example, he said he doesn't want to defund the police. He completely walked away from that position, basically, and tried to, anytime he was asked about a cultural issue, just pivot to, I want to make New York City more affordable. New York City needs to be cheaper. New York City is too expensive. Just as his campaign called it, a quote, relentless economic agenda. And I actually think it helped him overcome these actually very, very high culture war obstacles, like when you're trying to become the mayor of New York City and you say things like you want to defund the police as a matter of queer liberation, after New York City just went through a big crime wave.
Yeah.
He was actually able to connect with voters because he was constantly just pivoting to making the city cheaper. He talks about not getting wrapped up in ideas and values, but deliverables and tangibles. And again, I actually think that's doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. It's such a good message for the Washington community that tends to just have think tank lunches and go to conferences. And it's voters don't give a damn about any of this. They just want to know that you're going to make the government better. And
right.
You and I don't think that democratic socialism or communism is going to make the government better. But, if you're desperate because New York City is completely out of control and your choices between Andrew Nipplering Cuomo and Zoran Mamdani, who's saying he's just going to make the city cheaper, I see why a lot of people went with the guy who's like, I'm just going to bring your bills down.
Have we confirmed that Andrew Cuomo nipple ring thing? Was he wearing nipple rings, or was this he chafed them so bad he had Band-Aids underneath the shirt? What was the explanation for that? Did we ever figure it out?
I don't think there's any official confirmation, but I don't need official confirmation having seen the images. I don't know that there's any other conclusion to draw.
Okay, this is an invitation. Let me see if I can. Guy, can you pull up an image of Andrew Cuomo's nipple ring shirt? Is that possible? I don't even know if that's possible. I've never called for an image like this. Maybe I can find it myself. We'll see. We'll have a bit of a race here.
History in the making.
I found it. Hold up a second.
Fast.
I got it. Yeah. No, this is good stuff. Can I take me full screen here? Here's.
Yeah, we need it full screen.
Yeah. Here's Cuomo's nipple rings. This guy, unreal. Look at that guy. Look at him in the nipple rings.
But there's no other explanation for it.
No, I don't. I think you're totally right. Yeah, those are nipple rings. Okay, well, there he is. So he should be, for that reason, and not just killing old people throughout the state of New York, he should be nowhere near power. There he is, Andrew Cuomo. Yeah.
Should be mayor of Daytona Beach.
The chat is disgusted by this. There's vomiting going on. Please blur that out, Vince.
I like that you zoomed in.
Yeah, no, that was Guy did the zooming. That was Guy who did the zooming. Anyway, so there we go. That was Andrew Cuomo. Okay, but going back to Zordon, then what you're telling me is that fundamentally all you have to do is not talk about your radical positions. He just shoved them. He's just like queer liberation and defund the police, and I'm going to arrest Netanyahu, and like on and on and on. He just shoved all of that, and instead said, you know what's really crappy? Life's too expensive. You know what's hard? Starting a small business. And he just ran on stuff like that and filmed a few viral videos, and enough New Yorkers were dumb enough to fall for it.
Well, I don't think it works unless you have a foil like Andrew Cuomo. So I think the only, like, in addition to that, just being a smart campaign strategy, it just doesn't resonate unless it's this new guy who is only talking about making bills like cheaper. And then you have Andrew Cuomo, who presided over the disastrous pandemic, and who he's sort of a mascot of the national Democratic establishment. So I think a lot of it was voting against Andrew Cuomo. I think actually probably most of it was voting against Andrew Cuomo because he is such a profoundly bad option that people are like, whatever, we'll throw a disruptor in there.
And the other piece of this is Eric Adams. Eric Adams is running as an independent now. The reason he's the existing mayor of New York. And the reason he has to is because that party basically ran him out. They don't want a piece of him. He was critical of Biden. He was mildly critical of Biden's illegal alien policy, importing them into the United States, overwhelming the state of New York, the cities especially. And then the other piece of this was, you know, as soon as the Biden Justice Department turned on Eric Adams, oh yeah, we're going to go after you for getting upgrades on flights on Turkish Airlines. I was like, what? What kind of prosecution is this? Are you serious right now? And they did that as a political hit job. Trump comes in and says no more. The Justice Department gets rid of that prosecution. And now Eric Adams is considered like a Trump guy. So the Democrats ejected him from their party. And it's created all this super weird melodrama in New York now.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre situation because right now Democrats are scrambling to figure out whether they consolidate behind some new candidate, maybe like a Bill Ackman with lots of money, who's not kind of wild out there on the cultural issues, and who's also very much opposed to democratic socialism. Yeah. Or do they just, hedge their bets and go with Eric Adams, or do they accept Zohran Mamdani because the Democratic voters of New York City did it? Like, they're in a horrible position, and it's one that they've put themselves in by getting behind, honestly, one of the worst imaginable candidates in Andrew Cuomo. They did it to themselves. They made that choice, and they didn't even run a good campaign. So they ran a bad campaign with a bad candidate, and so now they have no good options in front of them. And New York might be, your average New Yorker who doesn't like democratic socialism might be the one that loses because of all of it.
Okay, I want to ask you about electoral politics, not just in New York, but here in the United States going into the midterms. We've got a new report out of Pew that tells us that if more people voted last year, it would have been worse for Kamala Harris. In other words, among Americans who are eligible to vote, who didn't, if they voted, President Trump had a 4-point advantage among that set, which is a really big deal. And it's also a big sea change in American politics. And I wonder what you think is going to happen with Democrats and voter registration going forward, because for as long as you and I have been alive, Democrats have concluded, oh, we just register more people to vote and then we win elections. Like, they kind of have this conclusion that, like, remember, vote or die and get out the vote, and we need to get you out. Yeah, rock the vote. Did you notice that last year they weren't doing that? There wasn't much of a voter registration drive by the Democrats last year. And of course, setting aside all of the roles that illegal immigrants play in distorting our system, I'm just talking specifically about actual legitimate voters. Then what do you think is going to happen going forward? Do you think Democrats are going to be trying to impede people from registering? I mean, what's going to happen here?
That's a really funny question. And I also think about this from the perspective of Republicans, because will Republicans suddenly be doing like mass voter registration drives? But does any of this also translate when Donald Trump is not the guy at the top of the ticket? And I think that's a really stiff challenge for Republicans. And it's one that should almost, for them right now, be condemning because I don't think they have a good answer to that at this point. I think it's truly a Trump-driven phenomenon. So maybe Democrats don't have to suddenly, stop doing all of the rock the vote stuff when Donald Trump isn't the guy at the top of the ticket, because Republicans seems to still not have. I mean, JD Vance is an interesting person. Obviously, I think he's very compelling for someone who can step into Trump's shoes and be appealing to the working class. It's just that Trump is so singular as a cultural force. I wonder if some of this comes from that, or at least Democrats are hoping it does. Not all of it does. We know that's for sure, because there are a lot of, for example, working class Hispanics that look at the Democratic Party's immigration policies and say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no way in hell. So it could go either way, but it's really bad news for Democrats.
For sure. I mean, here's a perfect example of how it blew up in their face. Josh Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania. He signed into law something called a motor voter law, where they just register you to vote when you get your license. And they lost because more Republicans were being registered to vote under the motor voter law. It was hilarious, actually. And for years, Republicans have sort of fought against this because the argument that they've made fundamentally is that, well, we need informed voters. We don't need lazy voters. And I totally agree with the sentiment. But I'm just laughing at the effect of all of this. The Democrats thought that, well, we just register everyone no matter what. Well, it's turned out those people are Republican voters. And if they get the chance, they're pulling the lever for Trump. And if we can sustain this, if Trump can actually pass this legacy off and people can credibly step into the gap and say, yeah, I represent the MAGA vision, then we're looking at a Republican Party that will have long-term success if that can be pulled off.
Well, the motor voter example is really funny too, because Democrats have long just relished their advantage with young voters and have seen it as something that was never going anywhere. And the 2024 election completely put the lie to that. And Donald Trump made significant inroads. And even we've seen young people's sort of sentiment shift on particular questions. Again, that like I worked for the conservative youth movement. I never, ever, ever thought that I would see those shifts from young Americans, and something happened really quickly in the Trump era that, like, for Democrats, they're now looking at this and they have no idea how to recapture young people, how to recapture the working class. Their best bet is that Republicans somehow screw it up. Which, again, if you're betting on Republicans screwing things up, that's not a bad bet historically.
Yeah, you're gonna make some money.
Yeah, exactly. By being too anti-populist and too sort of corporate, the yet to be determined, but all of the trajectory is in a direction that it should be terrifying Democrats, and it is.
Why did young people support Trump at such high levels, in your view? What was the explanation for that?
I think it was like as simple as him being politically, so I'll say politically incorrect. So he was sort of for the free speech movement. He was against the strictures of, like, this is the young people who came out of the Me Too movement, the COVID era, speech regulations, and sort of what we call peak woke, capital P, capital W. And I think in Trump, you see somebody who just absolutely exposes all of the ridiculousness of that. I think that was probably the determining factor. Overall, I think a lot of young people went for Trump because the Biden economy sucked and Kamala Harris couldn't answer for it. But I think like what tipped the scales is that he became a cultural force because he was positioned well to as a foil to the ridiculousness of the left.
Yeah. And he got shot on stage and he stood up and he said, fight, fight, fight. And people are like, dude, that's authentic as shit. That's like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. That guy was rock and roll and the other people were psychotic scolds. And I was like, I know who I'm with. That's crazy. I can't even believe that happened. We're not even up to a year on that. That's July 13th. That's coming up. 1 year today was when Biden collapsed on a debate stage. But it's amazing.
Happy anniversary to the Biden collapse.
Yeah, happy anniversary. Well, you keep up the great work, Emily Jashinsky. I can't wait till I get a chance to hang out with you. We'll crack open beers on your great show, airing 10 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays now with Megyn Kelly's network. Congrats, Emily.
Thank you, Vince. Looking forward to that.
Good to talk to you. All right, there she is, Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky. She's great and always been such a good reporter and guest through the years. Always like talking to her. Actually, I'll probably do bourbon on that show. You know, we got to do a little bit of bourbon. I don't know if anybody's had bourbon yet on that. Let me see here. I've got comments coming in. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Emily. Another great show, Vincent Crew. Thank you very much. Hey, I've got something fun to share with you today. Did you know that Big Balls is still in the government? You know about this? Yeah, we got some great news. Apparently, there was a claim that Big Balls had left the government entirely. Wired has an update for us on Big Balls. This is wonderful news. Big Balls is now at the Social Security Administration. Edward Big Balls Corstein's placement at the Social Security Administration comes after a White House official said that the 19-year-old had resigned from his position in government. He resigned, they had claimed. And now I can't read the rest of the Wired article because I don't actually subscribe to it. But the good news, I'll just tell you right up front, is that Big Balls is sticking around, which is wonderful. My buddy Chuck Ross summarized it this way. Take a look. Chuck said, so he wasn't sacked. He just was shifted around a bit. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. They just shifted him around. You know, it was a little uncomfortable for a moment, but they got it all solved. And now he's at the Social Security Administration. Yeah, he was just itching to get in there and fix something. So there we go. Big Balls sticks around. This guy, if there's anybody the press hates, at least in the top 10 of Trump officials, and there's a long list, I think, but I feel like Big Balls for a time, he keeps on showing up in the list. They just hate this guy. They hate him. How could a young person do this? This is the party that pretends that they believe that children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. This is the party that pretends all that. But the second you put a 19-year-old with some wisdom in charge of making the government more efficient for the Trump administration, they go absolutely crazy. They go absolutely crazy. But that's wonderful. So I love that Big Balls is sticking around, and he survives. He survives to fight another day. We got Big Balls over at the Social Security Administration. My thanks again to you for being here. The show has been, I have to tell you, just the behind the scenes and kind of how we're operating as a team. It's just been running as well as anything could possibly run. Our team here has been great. Thank you for being with us through the occasional technical hiccups we have every so often. I'm keeping these guys guessing because I bounce around between my home studio and my DC studio, and everyone's just trying to keep up with me. So I appreciate not only the audience, which I do, best damn audience in media, but the whole team that makes all of this operate each day. Thank you for that. If you're just checking in on us right now on Rumble, would you hit that subscribe button and join us so that we can be with you every day? We do this thing live 10 a.m. Eastern every day, rumble.com/Vince. This show always has Big Balls. There was no question about that. The show consistently has Big Balls. And so we're here for you every single day, 10 a.m. Eastern live, rumble.com/Vince. And of course, the podcast, which is just humming along. Thank you for that. If you're just watching or listening for the first time, please subscribe to us. Get us every day. And then finally, I've got the radio show. We got the big national radio show. It's the same position that was occupied by Rush Limbaugh and then the great Dan Bongino. And now your humble servant gets to do this each day, 12 to 3 Eastern time, rumble.com/Vince. We have that show live. Or just go to thevinceshow.com, and I got your local radio listings there. Ever heard of radio? We got a local radio listing for you, thevinceshow.com, and just click where to listen, and you can find me there. Well, that about wraps it up. Great being with you today. Man, we got a bunch of big shows coming for you next week as well. Stick with us for that. Great to have you here. Up next on Rumble, Tim Pool is the raid today. We got Tim Pool coming up next.
How you doing?